You are listening to the CADDle Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentek Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The CADDle Call podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the CADDle Call podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentek Consultants. I am Jim, your disturbingly Santa-looking host, since it's close to Christmas time. And with me, as always, is my partner,
Rocco,
who doesn't look like Santa. He looks a little bit more like Polly Walnuts. I'm just saying. And because he does, I like to make him suffer through the engineering joke of the week. Even Christmas won't save you, Rocco. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. Why did the electrical engineer quit his job at the power company?
Why?
He was shocked by their lack of current technology. All right. Yep. Sorry, folks. You know, torturing Rocco means everybody must suffer with him. All right, folks. So
that
today,
is definitely one of the better ones, I gotta say.
That's sad when that's one of the better ones. It tells you how evil I am with these. So today we have an old friend on the show. Matt DeBasio, my favorite digital anarchist, is here. So welcome back, Matt.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Always
great to be back.
So, all right. So for those of you who don't know, Matt is an estimator and construction technologist for Agnes Construction Management, and he's a recurring guest on the show here. And today, Matt kind of suggested our topic, right? He wanted to talk about kind of the advent of AI and new technologies and how they are impacting the construction estimating process. Before we get into that, I want to give Matt a chance to introduce himself to some of our new listeners. So, Matt, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your background and exactly what you do over at Agnes?
Well, you guys know me pretty well by now, I think. But for your listeners out there, I work for Agnes Builders in Philadelphia, PA. And as you mentioned, I am both an estimator and the resident construction technologist, we'll say. I spend probably 80% of my time in estimating and pre-construction and 20% with the technology stuff. But that is certainly enough to keep me busy, and there's never a dull moment. I'm never bored, and I love it. So
it's always good when you're not bored. That's a definite plus. Cool. So, all right. So the topic for today is an interesting one, particularly around the AI interactions in the estimating arena, because as regular listeners of this podcast know, I think that most of AI is a load of empty hype built by marketing people to sell more software. Having said that, though, there is a lot that is being done with machine learning and native language search and data access systems that aren't AI, but they're really great tools. And those tools, they can dramatically improve the estimating process, right? And I know that Matt has kind of been on his own personal quest to find the perfect estimating system for his company. And he's been looking into a lot of these intelligent systems that are moving well beyond basic manual takeoff and estimating calculations. And I kind of want to see what he has come across in the terms of workable systems that aren't just marketing hype. So, Matt, what have you been seeing, in terms of the machine learning systems out there for estimating, right? What areas do you see advanced technologies already having an impact on?
Well, first, I just want to say I sort of chuckled your intro regarding the empty hype built by marketing people. I do tend to agree with that to a certain degree. There's been a lot of hype around AI and what it can do and what people think it's going to do versus what it actually does. But your question related to machine learning in estimating and other technologies that are having an impact, I think it's helpful, as we always do. I sort of break things down into different areas, right? So when you talk about estimating, we're really talking about scoping a construction project and then applying costs and time to those scope items in order to figure out how much it's going to be and how long it's going to take to build things. But in order to get there, we've also got takeoff, right? You've got to extract quantities and scope items from digital documents, typically 2D. And then there's also kind of your general processes within just an office environment or any company, including construction, that's within pre-construction and also forward to operations. So what we've got are a few different areas working, right? And the native language search, that's one of the things that you had mentioned, right? Let's start with that because it's something I think most people are probably a little bit familiar with at this point, or at least you've heard about ChatGPT and things like that. So in that arena, what I think has really started to make an impact is just this idea of being able to very quickly query a set of documents, whether it's your drawings or your specs. Now, there's been some level of searchability in documents for a while now, right? Anybody that uses Bluebeam, I know you guys teach Bluebeam, you've been able to do that for quite a while. But what the language models are starting to bring to the table is you can actually ask questions or like converse with your construction documents, which I think is kind of an important distinction. Example, you've got a spec book or you've got a set of drawings with notes, and you're going to ask it questions like, what is the load bearing capacity for pile foundations, right? Now that's something that you couldn't necessarily search for in like a Bluebeam search scenario, but these days there are tools out there that could probably find that information for you pretty quickly and give you a reference back to where it was found, right? We also mentioned takeoffs, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit, get a little bit more into this, but image recognition is another big one, right? So you've got a 2D drawing set and you can query that the same as you would text, looking for certain symbols or abbreviations, things like that, right? But I also think human estimators still have to look through many, many pages of documents for all kinds of things, right? Sub-selection, you've got to look through the document set and identify all the scopes that are needed and then prepare an appropriate list for invitations. For scoping, you've got to analyze the drawings, keynotes, general notes, schedules to understand the scope for every trade, and then generate the scope or line items. Takeoffs we talked about, scaling the plans yourself and determining the quantities. Specs, skimming through to determine what's important to carry over to the scope sheets. Details, right? I always say the devil is in the details. You've got to seek out and find those important things you've got to watch out for, right? Material substitutions, exclusions, inclusions, any kind of special requirements, inspections, materials, methods, things like that.
So what you're saying is basically anybody can do this. It doesn't require any kind of effort at all.
Well, what I'm saying is I chuckled with your empty hype because although I think we've made some big strides with AI tools and technologies that can help in some of these areas, the things that I'm describing are very much human tasks, right? There's just no way for a machine to really be good at this in the time that we are right now, right? There's just too much nuance in construction documents and kind of how things go for a machine to completely understand it, right? But I do think that there's certainly areas that AI tools can help an estimator in particular, or really anybody in construction, do their jobs more efficiently. So.
And I agree with you 100% on that. I think, honestly, I think the marketing salespeople would do themselves a big favor if they would just put it that way. You know what I mean? You get a lot fewer angry people when they're like, hey, it isn't a big red easy button. I push it and it's done. No, but we have some great tools that are going to really help you save a lot of time and make it a lot more accurate and efficient. It seems a simple answer to me.
I think that's kind of the root of all this, but they're not going to sell much software if they listen to you and I describe it.
Fair enough. So I tell you what, I think, in kind of the estimating arena, right? The holy grail, I guess, that most of my clients are looking for. It's a system that can read through a plan set and begin recognizing, right, similar symbols and call outs and even spaces from whether it's, a PDF or a drawing, without that need for a person to go in and like Matt was saying, manually draw out and label each item directly, right? The ideal is to have a system that can read through a set of plans and tell you that, hey, you're going to need 350 linear feet of half-inch copper pipe on every floor without you even having to do anything. And look, the reality is, right, that the problem here is that is no small feat for a computer, right? It has to be able to tell the difference between a line that's a pipe and a line that's a wall, right? And unless they're dramatically different and every single segment is labeled, and even then, right, crossing lines or text and hatching can seriously confuse that issue for that kind of automated reading, right? Even modern OCR and image recognition tools have come a long way, but I haven't seen anything that kind of can fully accomplish this perfect world state. So Matt, in your research, have you seen any systems that are making big strides in this space, and do you think that there are any that are ready for daily use, or do they still have a way to go?
I have seen some tools that have made some pretty significant strides. And when you say ready for daily use, I think that's a big question because it depends on what you're doing. So in certain arenas, specialty trades, they may be ready to go and have experienced, really huge leaps in productivity due to these tools. Whereas for other trades or other areas, it's really not all that useful at all. So you mentioned OCR, image recognition, and I think what we're talking about here is probably in the takeoff space. So let's just focus on that for a second. And you also, I think, were mostly referring to 2D documents, right?
Yep.
Drawings. You're absolutely right that it is often difficult to tell the difference between lines or line work that are on a 2D page, as far as what those lines are supposed to represent in terms of construction components or materials, right? So you use the difference between a wall that's a pipe or a line that's a wall. That is where BIM comes in, I think, right? Because those objects have properties and they've been assigned, real world sort of materials or assemblies. But the system that I thought of when you started talking about this, there's a takeoff tool out there called CADDle AI. And I believe this company is based out of Florida. That is the company that I think has made the biggest strides in terms of image recognition and sort of sorting through what we see on a 2D plan. It can recognize walls, rooms, corridors, and start to assign quantities to those things based on the way they're configured on a page. Now, I will say it's big strides, yes, but mostly in the architectural areas, right? So if you're a flooring company and you have a team of people who are, their sole job is to trace around rooms to get quantities of different floor finishes, those people have probably experienced a great leap in productivity, because now a tool like CADDle can do that automatically and very, very quickly, especially over large sets of drawings or large buildings and repetitive areas, right? You can, if you have a high-rise building where floors repeat, you can simply have the machine look at one floor and then multiply by 6 or by 10 or by 12 or however many floors. So that's a huge leap in productivity. But for the things that you talked about, like pipes, especially, or electrical work, the MEP trades, it's not really super useful yet for those trades, right? You still have to kind of trace out systems and understand where things are going, where they're tying back to.
Yep.
But what I will say, so that's for takeoff, but there's other sort of tasks, I think, in pre-construction that you could potentially supercharge, if you will, using some AI type tools, right? So for instance, sub-selection. I get assigned a project and I have to, what I do, I call it an initial page turn. I'll flip through and I'll recognize and call out all the relevant trades and then produce an appropriate list, right, for invitation to bid. Scope sheet, right? You're translating the plans, you're identifying line items, and then transcribing them onto a sheet. That could potentially happen automatically, like into an Excel sheet. Specs and details or addenda, right? You can use these language models to provide some sort of relevant context and then tie in what it's detecting back to your trade scopes of work or call out changes that it's identifying, right? I think all those things are still, it's time consuming, it's things that we have to do, but there are probably ways to use AI tools to sort of augment your process. Now, I will say you're still going to have a real human estimator review the output from from an AI tool that's generating these things. And I think, there's probably some additional context as to why like human involvement is still required, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely with that. And I think you're dead on, right, in terms of BIM being the next step. I wonder, just because I've seen it, right? There's not a huge ton of incentive. There's not a massive incentive for architects and engineers to provide that to the GCs. You know what I mean? And because they're like, hey, it's not my problem, right? I don't have, I've spec'd it out at an LOD, 300, and that's all we needed to get our jobs done and get paid. Why do I care what, 9 times out of 10, most of my clients are still pulling, like you said earlier, 2D PDFs, digital documentation to try and do these. And I think there's a gap there that we have to bridge.
Well, you have to remember that they're under contract to produce documents, meaning 2D documents. And if they design in BIM as a way to get there more efficiently, then that's what they're going to do. They can design the building in 3D and then produce 2D documents from that.
Yep.
But that's their goal, right, is to produce the 2D documents. So there's still ways to go, as you mentioned, with, could BIM be the answer? Yes, but there's still a few liability issues and sort of everybody has their own objectives, right? And in most designers' cases, that objective is to produce a set of 2D documents. So they want to do that as quickly as possible.
Exactly. And I think you're going to see, it's going to require a long-term shift in the contractual model, right, between owners and designers and builders.
You're absolutely right. And that's what I was getting to, but that could be a whole nother podcast topic.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep that one in our back pocket for the next one. So, all right. So Rocco, let's wake you up over there. How many of our clients do you see that are looking for these kind of, fully automated estimating systems? And how often do we need to get on a line and kind of talk them down to the reality and the limits of what the current state of technology allows?
Yeah, so those of you who listen to this podcast, you know that I'm the one that's obviously the least technical in the bunch. So it's funny because and I think for the most part everybody's in tune and they see AI as an enhancement to processes. But it's funny because every now and then we'll get a call in. And I'll bring Jim or the guys into the call, and they're asking all these crazy questions, and we'll hang up the call, and I'll call Jim or the guys later on and be like, "Is it me or was that guy snoring? Was he dreaming as to what he's looking to actually do?" So every now and then you get somebody in the bunch that's like way out there, like, really, are you looking for this tool to replace your job entirely? But I think for the most part, folks are in tune with, with the limits and that you need human interaction, right? AI is not going to replace us.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So look, folks, I know that I harp a lot on the AI tag and that it's not real, right? But advancing image recognition and BIM and digital twin integrations and, the blending of design files and capabilities into that standard deliverables, right, that are being received by the construction firms as we move forward, particularly as we get into more of like the integrated project design methodologies, right? And then that's becoming more common these days. I think that is driving and will drive a much more reliable estimating methodology, right? And I'm seeing more and more construction firms that are, like we were saying earlier, partnering with the engineers and the architects to use systems like Procore and Construction Cloud from Autodesk and others to kind of integrate the design model and generate very detailed and accurate estimating data from JumpStreet that updates in real time as design changes are made, right? And to my mind, that and I think is what Matt was starting to say, that's far more valuable than any AI system that I have seen to date. And eventually I think those two will marry. But Matt, what have you seen in terms of integrations and workflows like that, right? Trying the design and the build together rather than working them as separate processes. And do you see that having a big work on your personal work over the next few years?
So what I've seen lately has not been much different than what we've seen over the past, say, 5, 6, 10 years. But I also think that a lot of people like yourself are starting to recognize the importance of starting to shift that process a little bit. And it starts with your contractual relationship, right? We mentioned IPD. But design build is sort of a more familiar and common delivery method. But I think that the main point here is, with regards to estimating and pre-construction, is that we want to be early and often, right? We as a pre-con team want to have as much information as we can, as early as we can prior to the project starting. And we want to be able to iterate as things kind of evolve, right? So as the design evolves from very loose schematic to very specific or, construction level documents, we want to estimate more frequently. And I know there may be estimators out there saying, whoa, we don't want any more work. And I get that, right? But think about the typical delivery sequence in pre-construction now, right? Like we might have 3 major kind of passes at a project. We have schematic design, then we have design development, and then you want to move toward CDs or construction level or a GMP. Well, maybe there should be some smaller cycles in between those, focusing on certain systems where you're working very, very closely with the design team and giving them almost immediate feedback on ideas that they're tossing around, right? And that's where the systems of today, I think, fall a little short. It's very difficult to kind of speed up that process and iterate more frequently, right? You really want to kind of wait until you've got a fairly complete set of documents, run through them all, scope them more or less manually, as I described before, get all of your scope on the sheet, and then start to apply costs. If there was such a system that had really, really good data behind it for various systems or processes, as you started to change things or iterate, you could give more or less immediate feedback to the design team, right? So if they start to go down a path with a certain idea and the data says, or the information that you're giving them back says, this is not a good idea, this is going to cost way more than you think, it's going to be way more difficult, they can stop right there and pivot and start to head down a path that does make sense, right? And that's where I think we should be going. But as you pointed out, the systems that are currently out there don't necessarily allow it to happen as perfectly as I just described, right? I'm always shooting for utopia, and it's just not that easy. I think you used the term holy grail earlier, right? That's something great to shoot for as well. But I think we can get there in baby steps. And one of the things that I found in my quest for the holy grail is that number one, you need really good data as a backbone for this, and you need a system that is built to be agile, right? To iterate quickly and to provide that feedback really quickly. And I think we're getting close, but we're not there yet.
Fair enough. All right, so I tell you what, folks, we have been kind of focused on estimating so far, but there's a lot more that goes into the construction management side of this AI conversation and just QTO and estimating. And I know Matt has been looking a lot into those other functions recently as well, right? So we're going to take a break here, and when we get back, I want to talk about procurement and scheduling and the systems that he's seen having a positive influence in those spaces. All right, so stand by, folks. We'll be back in just a minute for more of the CADDle Call podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants to talk to you guys today about our Procore support services, and in particular, what we do here at Zentech as certified consultants around Procore analytics. All right, are you guys tired of spending your days wading through dry, text-based reports in Procore, trying to identify which jobs are over budget or behind schedule or have excessive change orders, right? Trying to find the formulas and facts that you need. Well, Procore Analytics allows you to take all of that data and present it right inside of Procore to all of your end users as custom-built graphics and displays and charts and just things that are easily readable that will update in real time. And Zentech Consultants specializes in helping you set Procore Analytics up within your own system. So Rocco, where can folks go to learn more about our Procore Analytics support services?
Yeah, just hit up our website at zentechconsultants.net. Give us a ring, 866-824-4459, or drop us an email, sales@zentechconsultants.net, and check out our podcast. I think we even did a podcast on Procore Analytics.
I think we did. So there you go, folks. Remember that Zentech Consultants is a Procore certified consultant, and we specialize in helping you get the most out of your Procore system. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the CADDle Call podcast. We're talking with Matt DeBasio from Agnes Construction Management about advanced technologies, what we are loosely calling AI for the sake of today's conversation, and how Matt sees them positively impacting the construction industry. And in the first half of the show, we talked about kind of the estimating process, but in this half, I want to talk about some of the other construction-related processes that can see just as much, if not even more, benefit from advanced automations. So Matt, let's start with the procurement of material for our sites, right? Coordinating suppliers and quotes and deliveries and so on. It's a monumental task that has just always been a manual process, right? What's happening with modern tech to kind of change that? And what systems have you seen that are kind of really innovating in the procurement space?
That's a really good question. So, and you're absolutely right, because that's one aspect of the business that is super, super important, right? I believe we talked a little bit about this very idea. We had a whole podcast on this maybe a couple of years ago, on the heels of the pandemic, where procuring, just getting stuff to a job site was incredibly difficult, and it changed kind of the whole way that we did things, or at least the way I did my job, right? I learned to just ask questions about how long is that going to take? Well, things have smoothed out a little bit since then. So now, to your question, we're going to look at, well, how can we improve this process even further, right? And me personally, I've found a couple of tools out there. Now, I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but I try to keep tabs on what people are doing and who has identified problems like this and kind of what solutions they've come up with. And for procurement, there's a company out there called Build Vision. I believe they're based in New York, so not too far from you guys. And their plan is to sort of give CMs a more vertical approach to procuring like big ticket items like mechanical and electrical equipment, right? So what they're proposing is, if we want to start buying things directly, we can jump onto a platform and get, accurate pricing or competitive pricing, and sort of secure, commitments for the delivery of it, right? So those lead times when, in my typical estimating bid day, I'm scoping at someone and say, hey, how long for that piece of equipment? They're like, well, between, 10 and 14 weeks. Okay. So you got a range, but if you can sort of get commitments while you're while you're procuring, like you're pricing and getting commitments on lead times and delivery and procuring things kind of all at the same time, that could drastically improve predictability, right? So now when you make a schedule, that item you can put in, it's not just a range, or you're not being conservative and then kind of playing around with how that affects the rest of your tasks. It's more predictable, and that's really the goal of any good process in construction, because construction is so complex. Things come up, mistakes happen, or things change, and that's unpredictable. So the more predictable you can be, the better it is for the project and for the industry.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and it's I'm sure that even that, right, with their lock-ins, there would be variations, but it's going to be a day or two instead of a spread of 4 weeks, and that makes a huge impact on your bottom line. Yeah,
it absolutely does. I mean, that's, we talked a little bit about, I think, just-in-time delivery, right, and how that was kind of the norm, but then the pandemic screwed that all up. So predictability is the name of the game. So if you've got a tool out there that can help you do that, especially for big ticket items or anything that's custom built, right? Some of that stuff is not off the shelf, right?
Fair enough. So I think that one of the stumbling blocks that we've hit in the construction industry, right, with the advent of modern technology, is it's simple data overload. We have just a ton of intelligent software systems that generate just insane amounts of data, right, on our financials and our KPIs and forecasting and delivery times and a million other items, right? And I think the problem is sorting through that data and finding ways to focus on the things that are going to directly impact your job, right, in an efficiency way. And I think that's where a lot of the newer machine learning systems are being adapted to really good effect. Look, if you got a knucklehead like me looking at things, for me to parse through 600 historic projects and determine, which vendors or PMs or issues are most likely to cause good or bad outcomes, it's a big struggle, right? And it can take weeks of my time. Whereas, a good, quote unquote AI type system, that can be done in a matter of seconds, right? And data sorting and categorizing becomes faster and better and more reliable each time we add and run through another job, right? That's the learning part of machine learning in action. That's what it's really meant to do. So, Rocco, do you see a lot of people struggling to parse through their construction management data because there's too much of it? Or do you find that folks feel like, hey, we've got just about the right amount of data and we're okay?
No, a lot of too much at their fingertips, and they actually come to us to help them figure out ways to kind of dummy it down to meet their needs. It's funny. It's like, Excel like still remains the king in a lot of ways, right? And we talk to a lot of firms that are using some of these systems, and it's like it's too much. I just need to simplify it down. Can you guys work with me and help build some dashboards? And that's where we're starting to talk to a lot of folks about Power BI and the integration and just simplifying it, right? Because the systems are great, but and even outside of construction, right? Jim and I had a conversation just yesterday about manipulating our employees' time data, and we have a time tracking system. And I asked the question, and Jim's like, "Well, the system can't do it, but I could extract it to Excel and massage it for you." So yeah, there's data overload for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes going easier is better for everybody.
And I have to say, man, that really hits home for me too, because I don't think our industry in particular has a problem with not enough data. I think there's definitely too much of it. I think I've said before, the term big data was thrown around for a while, a couple of years back. I don't think there's any better example of big data than a construction project, right? There's probably millions of points of data, but I also think that that's where the true value of AI will eventually come about, when there are algorithms that can learn based on your company's plethora of data or historical data, right? So, I mean, just as an example, if a CM like us only builds in a particular state or region, they don't need or want like a language model that's referencing data from the entire country, right? There's like localized factors for building in a particular area, right? The subcontractor community, specialty trades, local rules and regulations for permitting and zoning and logistics and weather, right? So rather, I would love if there was an AI tool out there that could look at my current projects and compare it to all the previous projects in order to identify like trends or any anomalies, or even highlight possible errors or areas of risk, right? There's huge potential when it comes to that kind of reporting and like predictive and prescriptive functions. So that's where I think it's really going to come and be valuable, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I absolutely, and that's why, we get a lot of the listeners are giving me like, Jim, why do you always give such a grief over AI? AI is coming. It's the future. I'm like, maybe someday, probably not in my lifetime. It's, but this, machine learning, this adaptability, algorithms that will repeat and identify similarities. Oh, that's game changing. I love that stuff. And I think it's going to have a huge impact on the construction industry.
You got it, man.
So I tell you what, let me ask you this then, Matt. I guess, one area that I think data overload hits really, really early and really, really hard on any construction job is in scheduling. Have you seen any major work, with these AI tools in this space? And are there any systems that you looked at that have caught your eye along scheduling?
Not strictly related to AI or machine learning tools. And I think what we had just talked about, kind of analyzing historical data, if there was an algorithm out there that can look at previous schedules, planned versus actual, and then you're feeding it like factors, everything that happened on site that might have caused delays or changed the duration of a task as it was originally planned. That would be really, really groundbreaking, right? Because then it's going to tell you, hey, the last 6 times you had a similar system or task, it took much longer than what you're putting in right now.
Yeah.
Or, hey, it looks like you're building this project in Canada and you're not accounting for enough weather, right? It's going to snow a lot and you're probably not going to be able to get your underground utilities done in the time that you think. So that may be coming, but I would like to see kind of more analysis. And it's just like anything else, right? Garbage in, garbage out. You've got to be able to feed it good data and tell it how and why to make those determinations. But there was one other tool that I had found earlier this year that I thought was pretty interesting. It was a project out of Duke University. There was a group of students there that I think this was their project for the engineering program. And it was really simple, but I thought it was pretty effective. It was called QuickCal, I think. And what they did was they realized that the idea of pull planning was, it's super effective, and a lot of companies do that now, including ours. We pull plan on almost every project, but people tend to still do it manually, right? You have a whiteboard or like, a grid kind of set up all around your trailer, and every trade has like a colored sticky note that they're going to write a task and when they're going to start it and anything that needs to be done before they can start their task. So everybody comes together and sort of schedules upcoming tasks with accountability, right?
Right.
Well, what they did was they allowed you to just kind of take a quick snapshot of like a board, a pull planning board, and it converted it very quickly to like an actual schedule. Doing a 6-week look ahead or a 12-week look ahead. And I thought that was pretty cool for a couple of reasons. Because number one, the idea of pull planning didn't go out the window, but it changed dramatically once, again, I'm referencing the pandemic. I swear I wasn't going to do this for this podcast.
Well, it's been a major impact on the industry, and it will be for decades to come. So you might as well.
Yeah, it's changed everything on how we do things. But, people used to be physically present for these meetings, and then it kind of turned into like an online thing. Well, if you're unable to be physically present, or if you just want that pull plan, represented in a more traditional schedule form, This is a pretty easy way to do it. So I thought it was just innovative, and it came from, a university project. So that was pretty cool. But I would really like to see the AI thing take off with regards to scheduling, like just looking at tasks and kind of giving you a heads up, like, no, that's wrong. Because let's face it, every time we make a schedule, it's not always accurate. Something always changes. Something always takes longer, or you can move faster and through certain tasks. I would love to get a computer on that to learn, like, what are we doing wrong here, man?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, scheduling, like I said, it's always a big problem. I think another area that I think I want to make sure we touch on this today before we wrap up. It's kind of the pros and cons of generalization versus specialization. Big construction management systems like, Autodesk Construction Cloud and Procore and Buildertrend, right? And the like, they've kind of taken the approach of, we're going to be your one-stop shop, right? And they're all working at, integrating and improving their AI offerings. But I think they do it with this mind towards everything is going to work under this one giant umbrella. And I think that there are other packages out there that are more specialized, right? They choose a particular trade or a particular process that they focus on and they optimize to address common concerns that are specific to whatever that particular industry is. And you can easily see pros and cons to each method, right? Particularly around data integration and interoperability. And what I wanted to ask you is, with the research that you've been doing around these systems for Agnes, do you have a preference for which approach you think will work better in the long term?
If you're asking me to pick a side, that's awfully hard. And the reason is what you stated earlier. There's pros and cons to each approach, right? So it would be great if there was a single platform that sort of handled all of your needs well. But with that generalization, you're giving up sort of certain features that might be useful for, particular areas and tools. So on the one hand, I'm a big proponent of best tool for the job. But on the other hand, I think users often will have, app overload, right? They don't want to use 16 different programs to get their job done. So if you can do most of what you need to do in kind of one environment, and then you use a couple of other specialty tools for, more advanced tasks, then I think that's probably the right approach. So I can't pick one or the other, right? I'm sort of recommending that everybody split the difference. So in our case, we use Procore. That is our kind of the centerpiece of the software ecosystem. And that is for, operations. So most everything is kind of run through there. But if you have a particular tool that does something better, why wouldn't you use that? Well, I think you already answered it right at the end of your question when you said integration, right? That's another area where I think our industry is falling woefully short. You could, in fact, use the best tool for the job and have 16 different apps if they all talk to each other, but they don't, at least not in the way that we would like them to. So best approach is probably to split the difference, right? Like lump most of your tasks into a single environment and then use, when you have a really specialized need, then look for a more advanced tool.
I think it's a great answer, and I could not agree more with your last point there, because one of the things I want to throw out here today, and it's a personal pet peeve of mine, and it is around integration. And I'm going to surprise everybody out who has heard me over the years, beat up on some of the bigger companies, particularly in the design space. But I think there is a model that happened here over the last 5-6 years that I think everybody in the construction space, every software developer needs to look closely at. And it's the relationship between Autodesk and Esri on the design side. For years, those two were at each other's throats in the civil, site design space, between GIS and land planning. And they were constantly fighting, and there was zero interoperability. And they finally came to a point where they said, you know what? Why don't we just make it so that I can take my data into your stuff, you can take your data into my stuff directly, and we support and build apps for each other, and your guys support my stuff and my guys support your stuff, and they formed this partnership. And as a result, it made everybody in the industry, it made everybody's life a million times easier, and they doubled their sale. Both companies doubled their sales within inside of 2 years. It's the ideal answer.
Yeah, and I think the term for that is one of those mashup words. They call it co-opetition, right? So it's cooperation and competition. So there's still independent companies. They're still doing their thing, but they decided to cooperate, and they both were more successful, right?
Yeah.
rather than cutting each other's throats. I love it. I love those stories.
Yeah, and I think that's the way that the whole industry should be looking, particularly in construction space. I think that you hit on the right answer there. So I tell you what, folks, as always, I want to give Matt here a chance to talk about something related to our topic today that I wasn't smart enough to ask him about, which we all know was an immense amount of stuff I ain't smart enough to ask about. So Matt, what about it? What else do you think that people should be considering with, regard to AI in the construction world?
That's a great question. So with regards to AI, because we did focus a lot on that and kind of the hype versus reality aspect of it, I think there's a couple things that folks should be thinking about, especially in the construction industry. So if you're asking me to throw out just a couple of things for listeners, the first thing is, well, one of the common themes that I come across from colleagues when I talk about the potential or impact of AI, right, are what if the AI is wrong, or I don't trust the machine, or I'm on the hook if the AI makes a mistake, right? So today's AI systems are never, ever 100% correct. So a really useful AI has to account for this limitation, right? So for an AI to be useful, especially, and I'll just use Precon as an example, it needs to be accurate when it makes claims or point you toward information so that it enables estimators to sort of back check the claims very easily and immediately, right? So we can see that certain AI tools are sort of evolving to output things that will help the estimator verify like correctness, we'll say, right? So like the sheet number and title that the scope was found on, or just an explanation of why this particular scope was detected on this page, or why it returned a certain answer to a query. Although sometimes the answers don't make sense, right? But it helps us to learn sort of how the AI is learning to interpret the documents. And then like just highlighting parts of the page where the scope was found. Like, so where did you find this? So I think if you focus on that, right, like how can AI help you be more correct, like verify things faster? That's one way that it can like help us today, right? And then the other thing I wanted to just throw out there is I also think like other technologies that we've seen kind of get trendy in the past, there's going to be some sort of a legal wormhole with this stuff, right? So I'll give you an example. If there's an AI tool like in Microsoft 365, MS Teams, which we all use very often these days to meet, and the AI tool is taking notes for you, or grabbing snapshots of a shared display every so often throughout the meeting, what does that do to like legal implications? Like, is a lawyer going to say, hey, that's great, we would love if a computer is kind of listening in and taking notes and drawing conclusions, or writing out a summary of what was said, but how does that hold up in court?
That's a great question. I hadn't really thought about that.
And so you had mentioned like the IPD, the future contractual relationship. Well, if you're having a meeting with a construction manager and some subs and an owner and an owner's rep and architects and engineers and everybody's on this, and there's things discussed, and the AI is sort of recording it or drawing its own conclusions, if there's some sort of dispute about what direction the team was supposed to take based on that meeting, I mean, that would be like a nightmare in discovery for an attorney.
Yeah, and actually, it falls under the same thing like traffic light cameras, right? That half the states are like, no, that's not admissible in court because you can't verify. Was the timestamp right? Is it programmed to go off at a period before the light? Did it? You know what I mean? It's got all kinds of questions. Exactly. Yeah, there's a whole legal side to it. Good.
Yeah, not that we would rely on an AI tool. But I'm sure there's people out there that prefer to have, somebody kind of taking notes during a meeting. But I think there's a legal aspect, and that it was sort of an offshoot of my first comment about, what if the AI is wrong, or like, I don't trust it. So in our industry, construction, it's already very litigious, we'll say. And the whole name of the game is to manage risk. So I just wanted to throw out that, if AI is potentially introducing another risk that we're not really thinking about. So I'll leave you with that nugget.
Important safety tip. All right. All right, folks. And I think with that, we're going to get out of here. But before we go, I just want to say thank you one more time to Matt. It is always a pleasure to have you on the program. So there are always great conversations when you're on.
You too, guys. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to catch up with you again. Thank you so much.
All right. We will talk to you soon, Matt. And with that, folks, we're out of here, and we'll catch you next time on the CADDle Call podcast. All right, everybody. Today's CADDle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net. Or you could even call us, 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.